The factory smelled of metal and oil, the air thick with heat and sweat. Machines clanked and hissed, and workers moved like ghosts through the dimly lit space, their faces hardened by long hours and heavy labor. Hannah had been working at the steelworks for 6 months. She knew how to hold her own in this rough, male-dominated environment. Most of the guys gave her a wide berth, either out of respect or fear. She didn't care which. But lately, something had been bothering her. Something she had seen before. A few months ago there was new hire, a young lad named Ryan. He was barely out of high school, fresh-faced and eager, but quiet and unsure of himself. That was all the excuse Mark, Tony, and Jake needed. It started the same way, missing tools, rigged work orders, small but relentless humiliations. One day they filled his boots with grease. Another they loosened the bolts on his workstation, making his whole setup collapse mid-shift. He had tried to laugh it off, tried to pretend it didn't get to him. But the final straw came when they locked him inside one of the storage containers at the back of the factory. It had been near the end of the shift, and no one had noticed he was missing until a supervisor started asking questions. By the time they found him, nearly 2 hours had passed. Ryan had been banging on the metal walls, drenched in sweat, his breathing ragged from panic. He didn't come back the next day, or the day after. By the end of the week, he had quit. No complaints filed, no confrontation. Just another name scratched off the employee list. And the bullies? They laughed it off as if they had simply swatted away an annoying fly. Hannah had never forgotten that. And when she saw them circling Daniel, another young lad just hired, she knew history was about to repeat itself. Mark, Tony, and Jake were the worst of the lot. They were factory veterans, men who thrived on power and intimidation. And Daniel, he was the perfect victim. It started small. His tools would go missing or his lunch would mysteriously disappear from the break room fridge. Then it escalated. They'd mess with his work, swap his orders, or make sure he was the last one to clock out by piling extra tasks on him. And today they weren't even pretending to be subtle. Hannah had just finished her shift. It was midday, and was heading toward the lockers when she heard the sound. Low laughter, the scrape of boots against concrete, a dull thud. She rounded the corner and saw them. Daniel was backed against a stack of metal crates, his lunchbox ripped open and its contents scattered on the floor. Mark loomed over him, sneering. He sneered, "You're useless here, Danny boy. Why don't you quit before someone gets hurt?" Daniel didn't answer. He just bent down, trying to pick up his spilled food. That was when Jake shoved him hard. He hit the floor with a grunt, his glasses skidding across the grease-streaked tiles. The laughter rang through the break area. Hannah clenched her fists. Enough was enough. She stepped forward, her boots striking the concrete like a drumbeat. "Pick on someone your own size." 3 heads turned toward her. Mark warned her, "Stay out of this, sweetheart. This ain't your fight." Hannah shot back, "I just made it mine." "You serious?" Tony retorted. Hannah didn't answer. She moved, fast. Her boot connected with Jake's knee in a vicious strike, making him stagger. Before he could recover, she drove her elbow into his jaw. His head snapped back, and he crumpled against the crates, dazed. Tony lunged at her. She sidestepped effortlessly, twisting his arm into a painful lock before slamming him face first into the metal lockers. The impact echoed across the break room. Mark, the biggest and meanest of the 3, roared in fury and charged. Hannah ducked under his wild punch, pivoting smoothly. Then she struck, a brutal knee to his stomach, knocking the air out of him. As he gasped, she followed up with a spinning elbow to the temple. Mark collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. The factory had gone dead silent. Workers stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. The bullies lay groaning on the floor. A deep voice cut through the silence. What the hell is going on here? The factory manager, Mr. Holloway, stood at the entrance to the break room, his sharp blue eyes scanning the wreckage before him. He was a no-nonsense man in his late 50s, with graying hair and a permanent scowl. He took in the scene, the scattered lunch, the bruised bullies, Daniel's shaken face, and Hannah standing tall, hands still clenched into fists. "Hannah, explain," demanded Mr. Holloway. She quickly replied, "They've been bullying Daniel for weeks, sir, just like they did with Ryan." A flicker of recognition crossed Holloway's face at the mention of Ryan. Daniel cleared his throat, still shaken but finding his voice. "They've been making my work impossible, messing with my tools, tripping me, hiding my reports, and then they did this." He gestured at the food on the floor. Holloway's jaw tightened. He turned to Mark, Tony, and Jake, still groaning on the ground. "Is this true?" None of them spoke. The silence was enough of an answer. Holloway sighed, rubbing his temple. Then his voice came out firm and final. "You're all done here. Get your things. You're fired." "What?" Mark questioned. Mr. Holloway firmly elaborated, "I can, and I just did. You should have been fired when Ryan left. I won't make the same mistake twice." Security was called. The three bullies were escorted out, still grumbling and nursing their injuries. Mr. Holloway spoke up again. "Hannah, I should write you up for fighting. But won't this time. Just don't make a habit of it. You let me know if anyone gives you trouble from now on." Daniel smiled. "Thank you, sir." Holloway walked away, already barking orders to the supervisors. The factory slowly returned to life. "You okay?" Hannah asked Daniel. "Yeah, thanks to you," he said. From that day forward, no one messed with Daniel or Hannah ever again. If you liked this heartwarming short story, please like and subscribe to my channel to check out more stories for the soul.